Howdy folks, I'm Southern Wolf of Southern Wolf Studios. Welcome back to Samurai of Hyuga. Let's check out our stats. It doesn't look like much has changed. We still have a very heavy leaning towards calculative, a heavy leaning towards perverted, a balance between charming and stoic, a leaning towards protective and finesse. Still at 100% attunement. Chapter 8, Jijinto. A spirit of greed. Her being taints those who are pure with her poison. I saw a nest of snakes. She must not be allowed to live. Every step I made away from Yamato and towards Jijinto was a step towards familiarity. It almost felt as if I was reuniting with an old friend. A large, disgusting, downright obnoxious old friend. The sort that you didn't lend money to, much less ask for a loan. But Ro wasn't my greatest concern. At least not in the moment. Traveling on these main roads had taken a toll on Matsumi, who grew more ill each passing day. I knew it was getting bad once her throat got sore enough that she stopped complaining about it. As Toshi and I shifted watches at night, we talked over our options. Okami-san, how is it that you're always alert before I wake you? The kondo whispered, trying not to stir the kid from her slumber. My eyes outlined her features. I'd been staring at the ninja for a while now, if only to pass the time. Toshi insisted on taking shifts during the night. But I couldn't sleep when someone else was awake. Never could. It's a ronin secret technique. We'll reach Jijinto tomorrow, and it'd be nice if we had a plan. The Kunoichi agreed. You said that you frequent the city before in your travels, but you didn't go into detail. What ought to be our greatest concern? Selling the Emperor's necklace. Extra row will take care of a lot of problems. Problems that a spirit animal can't solve. Selling the Emperor's necklace. Extra row will take care of a lot of problems. Problems that even spirit animals can't solve. I looked over at a sleeping Matsumi, who wore the Satsumo's ivory necklace. It was encrusted with jewels that were worth more coins than I could carry. Selling it for even a third of its actual worth would be difficult. I knew a merchant in Jijinto that could help with that. That necklace, Toshi replied, was his mother's. But if it is to aid us in our journey, then you are right, of course. I dwell on the past when the present is so much more important. Gomenasai. There was no need to apologize. It seemed like she just enjoyed reminiscing on days gone by. It also seemed like she and I were more opposite than I imagined. To Jijinto. We arrived on the outskirts of Jijinto. I took a deep breath. I didn't know when I'd get fresh air next. The largest city in Hyuga was filled with an assortment of bizarre smells, some of them being pleasant. All of them lively. Maybe it was the sound that I should be worried about. The cicadas that persisted throughout our journey would be considerably silent compared to the crowded marketplace that we were about to wade into.
I have read so often of Jijinto, and I'm eager to finally see it for myself. To imagine so many people living in such close proximity.
Matsumi beamed with excitement. I couldn't figure out what was so exciting about overpopulation, but I wouldn't spoil her mood. Her temperament aside, I noticed she was coughing less often today. Perhaps the worst of it had passed. The people of Jijinto were mostly peasants and merchants of the working class. Average folk who cared far more for their own business than they did for yours. Great when you're an assassin or anyone making a living through less than lawful means. If you wanted to move around unnoticed or lose yourself in a crowd, there was no better place for it than here. Bamboo and driftwood shacks lined the roads up to the gates. They were elevated off the ground with wooden columns, which offered some protection against wild animals and bandits, the latter of which was less likely to be deterred. What happened in Genfu was evident enough of that. Toshi piped up to offer an alternative explanation.
It is said in ancient times that celestial seas once enveloped Hyuga in horrendous floods. The monks atop what is now known as the Suijin Mountains. The only survivors prayed endlessly for the water spirits for forgiveness.
Our walking pace had slowed considerably. I blamed the kid, who was enamored by the legend she did not know yet.
Assuredly their devotion was not in vain.
It certainly wasn't, the kondo continued.
But all while the water spirits enjoyed a new ocean the tsunami had caused. The greater sea dragon, Suijin, was riddled with guilt, so much so that he gave his own life to drain out the tides, leaving behind fertile fields and valleys. Believers of this tale elevate their houses off the ground as sign of remembrance of a time when the waters enveloped the land.
I let out a sigh that made me a target for Matsumi's ire.
Speak your witticisms when we are done with it, Okami.
I just want to know how those monks were able to repopulate the entire country is all. Attunement has increased. I just want to know how those monks were able to repopulate an entire country is all.
The Shingenja quickly turned away and hastened her footsteps. I don't believe she appreciated my remark.
It wasn't my fault the story had a very illogical fallacy in it. A group of old men, hermits on top of mountains, were the only ones left alive? The spirit should have done them a favor and swallowed them whole. No one else was willing to. We approached the city gates behind an old woman with a painfully slow pace. She was shorter than the kid, with hair knotted in a ponytail. She was dressed in a dark yellow kimono and carried a walking stick. I was hoping we could overtake her pace and be on our way, but Mitsumi's attire caught too much attention.
Goodness, now isn't that the most beautiful shade of red these eyes have ever saw? You must tell me, child, who is your tailor?
The words croaked pleasant words in an unseemly way, making it for a disturbing contrast. I could tell you now that her kimono was originally lightly faded, but that the sheets of sweat that rolled down from her brow had drenched them. There's a saying that the summer heat was cruelest to the elderly, so I could see why. No reply for her. I stepped in front of the kid with my katana in full display. It was a gift from her father. That's all you need to know. My intervention earned me a cold glance from Mitsumi, but I knew what was going on. I couldn't let anyone know that her name was Hashimoto, especially not in Jijinto. If I had it my way, she'd still be in the hemp sack that she fled the capital in. But as it stood, I needed to keep information about us to a minimum. That aside, the old coot composure crumbled, and I realized that those sunken eyes aren't just from age.
Come on now, just a little. The charmer, she just needs a little row is all. Just a little bit for a poor old woman. For the pain. You should respect your elders, girl.
Her words jumbled and rattled faster and faster. Granny here was hooked on something. Something more potent than sake, that's for sure. I was half expecting to clean blood off my katana when her wit returned to her. She bowed and apologized and more importantly, left us alone. I looked towards Toshi, who nodded in understanding. The Shingenja, on the other hand,
that impoverished Obasan, to think I complained of my own illness. Her ailment is so much greater. We could have given her some coins or for medicine.
Protective. I shook my head. There wasn't a medicine able to fix some folks, especially not when the medicine is what poisoned them in the first place. It's just the heat, kid. And let's get going and do what we came here to do. My wrist itched when I saw a guardsman at the city gate, until I remembered where I was. Blame Yamato. Law enforcement never hounded me so hard outside that forsaken capital. Even when I was an assassin, these mild-mannered militiamen always looked the other way. Just required more row than others. The guardsman ushered us inside with a yawn.
Shrine's on the left, you can't miss it.
It's a well-known and outdated custom in Hyuga to visit the shrine upon entering a town or city. Vendors make good use of this knowledge and line up their stalls along the way. Pickpockets found easy prey amongst tourists too.
It was just a hassle I wasn't sure I wanted to deal with right now.
Don't bother.
Okami, the direction of the shrine is this way!
Mitsumi yelled soon as I took a step off the beaten path. Too many years of making a beeline for the cheapest sake bars created a bit of a habit. Bad habits aside, we didn't have much time to mess around with monks. We needed information about the greed spirit, and I know just the place to get it. My opposition provoked a coughing fit in my companion. And besides, you're still sick. Isn't that right, Toshi? The Kondo raised her hand, wanting no part in the argument that was about to unfold. Wise beyond her years, that one.
But, Baka,
Mitsumi voiced her hesitation before lowering considerably.
I'm a Shingenja. My capacity for powers, if you will, are highly dependent on the bonds I make with local spirits. I won't attempt to educate you in specifics of the ritual communication between realms, but the ley lines between physical and incorporeal are such that...
The kid trailed on and on, while my mind went into a daze. Think of it as a personal defense mechanism against stuffing my brain with unimportant stuff. Looks like I had no choice but to give up to my undersized employer. Alright, kid, you convinced me. It was still early in the afternoon, and we made our approach up the curvy path. The Jinto temple sat atop a hill overlooking the rest of the city. While the streets were wide enough to fit 6 horse carts comfortably, we had to squeeze through the crowd of vendors. The yells of the merchants hawking their wares put me in a strange sense of ease. Ramen shops selling what they claim to be fresh vegetables, along with countless fishmongers and seaweed stands. The smells were enough to make my stomach growl, but the prices they asked for were enough to make it churn. Everything was overpriced, but visiting nobles didn't know any better. Finesse. I noticed a pair of tough-looking vagrants eyeing us over. At the time of these displays of strength, what's the best solution? I pull out my katana along with a wad of cloth and proceed to wipe off debris that didn't exist. The thugs were quick to avoid eye contact after that.
Tidy up your blade later, we're almost at the shrine.
Masumi berated me, the things I have to put up with. I guess it's a part of being a bodyguard. The Jijinto shrine served its purpose well. It had no doors. It was a standing structure which made it easy for foot traffic to get in, pay their respects, and get on with their business. This was most likely just the entrance shrine. A much larger traditional temple probably resided deeper inside the city. Not that I've ever been there. Even if it was only a customary pit stop, 2 sohi were stationed at the side of the shrine, each wielding large naginatas, graceful polearms with curved blades at the end of them. Their wielders were no less graceful. Maidens sporting the traditional red hakama skirts and white kimono jackets. It was essentially what Miko priestess wore, with the addition of cured leather scales that were hidden underneath. Perverted. As for how I know what they wear under their clothes, well, that's another story. We went through a series of bowing and phrases, and finally into the introspective meditation session. It was no surprise that I was the first to finish. What I was surprised is what happened next. The sound of glass breaking reached my ears, along with the thuds of wooden crates being smashed apart. It was obvious that a brawl was going on down in the alley not 40 feet away from the shrine, but the Soshi didn't move an inch. Calculative. I detected something from the warrior maidens, an inquisitive glance as if waiting for my reaction. I was the only one with a weapon, a visible one anyway, and I knew I was capable of using it, but they couldn't leave their assigned spots even if they wanted to. This wasn't their problem anyway. It's not my problem either. I had enough problems without adding a meaningless street brawl to them. Like always, I was in Jijinto for business, even if my business involved killing spears instead of people. A slight nuance, that my employer was the emperor himself, not some izakaya owner who wanted to off his bastard son. Though speaking of which, I had an idea. "You two ready?" asked my companions. Masumi was still deep in thought, almost daydreaming. It wasn't a good habit to have, as many dangers that lurked in the city.
The spirits compel me to compose a manner of calligraphy that...
The Shingenja noticed my oblivious expression, causing her to grow suddenly more stern.
I need to write down my spell, you nimwit.
I see, but sake comes first. I led the 2 of them to the canary nest. A bar as seedy as any other, but the drink was good. You just had to steam all the flavors out of it first. It was named after a noisy bird due to the squeal of the floorboards it made when he walked on them.
Instead of fixing the floors, the owner turned it into a gimmick.
Some say he's ingenious. I just say he's cheap.
I was starting to wonder if he remembered me before his eyes opened threefold. The portly man bowed deep enough to touch the floor with his nose.
I did not think... Please. I'll clear off a table at the bar and have a bottle of your usual warmed up immediately. While I preferred having my back against the wall at drinkeries such as these, I didn't have much of a choice this time around. The place was packed and buzzing, well, creaking, and we were lucky to find a seat at all. The canary sang a loud tune this afternoon, Iguchi. I sat down and was about to get comfortable until our host made a particular remark. She is. I also heard a tune about you a while back. Good to see it's true and that you're still putting that line of work behind you. Iguchi smiled in a friendly manner, as if we were old pals shooting the breeze. But rumors of me retiring? How in Hyuga did this fermented rice seller know about that? I don't recall making a public announcement. How did you come across this rumor? Attunement has increased. I don't recall making a public announcement. How did you come across this rumor? This is bad enough I had a reputation to begin with. Being well known in the underworld meant that you had enemies and opportunists working for them. While most of the underworld considered the Yakuza deadbeats, the dangers were still very real. Rumors were troubling, especially when I was babysitting Hashimoto's kid and running His Imperial Majesty's errands at the same time. Of course, I know better than to cross you of all people. The truth is, a woman came by not 2 weeks ago asking if I'd seen you. It was a brunette. with a nasty scar beneath her eye.
I'd bet any Bakuto she's a ronin, and not just from the katana she was carrying. Those eyes held.
I heard enough. My appetite for food was long gone, but my thirst for drink had grown considerably. Scar-faced, brown hair, and a killer's eyes. She was the last person I wanted to think about right now. Iguchi left us, and I was stuck in a mood that grew more sour by the second.
Natsumi nearly toppled over trying to climb atop a stool.
The bar seats were raised in a manner most folk weren't accustomed to, especially rich folk. Her appetite was stronger than ever, and she happily partook of an entire bowl of edamame beans. She was somehow able to create a conversation between bites and coughs.
You seem certainly popular for a ronin,
the kid munched down before continuing.
But if I may remind you, we have a figurative nest of snakes to uncover.
She had a point I couldn't ignore. I had to stay focused on the task at hand. I wanted my stay in Jijinto to be as brief as possible, and I wanted things to go smoothly, without any problems. But then a man took a seat next to the stool next to me, and with him, a series of problems. Pardon me, folks. I can't believe that this place is so full. Try not to let my face scare ya. I had a rough day is all. The man was tall and lanky, but with a face that had seen more than a few fights. And gathering from his bloody nose and black eyes, he had just lost one. Bandages wrapped every inch of his hands almost to his shoulders. I did my best to ignore him. Misery wasn't the only thing that loved company. Trouble did too. If I knew the type, he wouldn't need a prompt to tell us a story. So there I was, surrounded by 4 grizzled knife fighters. Broken glass littered the alley. There were cowards trying to get an innocent fellow such as myself to rob old ladies. Not my style. The only style I have, I told them, is the rising fist style. The man who hadn't introduced himself threw an uppercut into the air and shook his fist in dramatic fashion. It was incredibly lame and childish, but it seemed to fascinate the kid all the same.
I implore you to tell us more.
I'm Natsumi.
These two are Okami and Toshi, my companions. We arrived in Jinto not long ago in our search of someone.
I didn't like to be introduced to a glorified street thug, but the possibility of a quiet drink was already out the window. Good-natured or not, it was only a matter of time before he started asking for a free meal. Name's Hachirobe, but I just go by Hachi. Now, I'd love to go into details, but my throat's a bit dry. I was close enough on the guess, and with the perfect timing, a bottle of sake that I ordered earlier had arrived. Hachi looked at me like a puppy dog looked at its owner. You're lucky the kid likes your story. You're lucky the kid likes your story. I poured myself a cup of the warm brew and handed the bottle to the sociable street fighter. Judging from his face, he needed it more than I did. Maybe it would be good to drink with someone for a change. How long had it been since the last time I shared a bottle? How many years? A brunette appeared in my mind, so I took a swig of sake to get her out of it. That hits the spot. I felt my mind relax and my shoulders start to slump. I was far from feeling anything only but 1 cup in, but it was the act itself that calmed me down. Hachi poured his cup and raised it in a spirited toast. You're pretty awesome for a samurai, my friend. Folks like to say, all of you... Oh no! Time itself slowed down. This idiot's hand brushed against my precious bottle of sake, sending it tumbling down to what might as well have been oblivion. That bottle was more than half full, and that's coming from a pessimist. More importantly, it was about to shatter. Finesse. My focus was that of a master swordsman, my passion of that of a professional sake drinker. I raised my foot out at the last possible moment, balancing the jug atop my sandal. Hachi and I both let out deep breaths. The crisis had been averted. Toshi started clapping as if I was pulling off a parlor trick. Obviously she doesn't drink and was blissfully unaware of how much was at stake here. Men have cried over less, even if it was the cheap stuff. It was as good as gold after 2 weeks sober. Ahem. Mitsumi's cough brought me out of my stupor. That's right, I'm a bodyguard and I can't spend all afternoon drinking. Damn. Sometimes it was easy to forget that. Well, we all need to find a place to stay for the night. Some medicine for that cough of yours, kid. My drinking companion wiped the sweat from his brow before replying, though I wasn't speaking to him in the first place. Heck, I'm sorry about nearly breaking that bottle. Less I can do is offer you some clean futons and a place to stay for the night. And you mentioned you were looking for someone? I know Jijinto like the back of my fist. Another uppercut gesture. But this time, he had the jug firmly secure. Why did I have a feeling that this new companion of ours was going to be a major pain in my ass?